Mr. Ayyadurai, are you there?
Hey, Gavin, it's Shiva. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Ki hal chale, yar? TikTok?
Did you get held up by something in Kuala Lumpur or Bosnia?
Well, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a civil war going on in Kuala Lumpur that was started by the Bosnians. So
Oh, yeah.
we've been trying to follow it all day. It's looking worse than the original war with the Serbians over there, and it just shows you that Muslims they just can't cohabitate. This is way out. This is Bosnian Muslims in Kuala Lumpur.
Was Hillary funding the whole thing?
No, the Russians were. Do you speak any Urdu?
No, I speak
Or do you
Tamil,
not?
a little bit of Hindi.
Oh.
Urdu, spoken way up north. It's more, no, I grew up in Bombay, but I've been in the United States since 1970, since I was a 7-year-old kid, but I was born in Bombay.
Oh, the Tamils are cool. You got those Tamil tiger chicks?
Yeah, they like to fight.
This is a low IQ show, so you should be prepared for very softball questions and very adolescent discourse.
Ask him about the ducks and the horses.
Yeah.
I can handle it.
We were saying earlier on the show that Indians are our favorite immigrants, mostly because, and I know you're not Indian, but mostly because their religion is silly. It's just cobras playing the flute on a flying carpet and some elephant with 4 heads. And we also like Sikhs because their whole religion is just having a baba and wanting to fight rapists and thieves. So we'll take those. But Pakistanis, the Muslim browns, I'm not a fan. I find that Muslims assimilate less well than virtually every other immigrant. What do you say on that?
Well, if you look at the history of India, right? When the Mughals came in, right, whatever, in the many, many centuries ago, it was really about invasion and domination, right? It wasn't really about assimilation. It was more about dominating and enforcing their culture on people. Hinduism is so disorganized that sort of fits in everywhere, right? I mean, when I was growing up in India, my grandmother had pictures of from Christ to Rama, Shiva, everything. Everything was okay, right? Because every great spiritual leader is considered an avatar. So Hinduism is a lot more integrative in many ways, right? Every sort of anything goes.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be the same way that they act in business. Indians don't take your jobs. They open a bodega or a motel and just add more licorice and cigarettes to the equation.
Yeah, I mean, Indians are very they like hospitality. So hotels fit in very well with the Indian culture model.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing in England what happens with Muslim populations, and it seems like, we had the Jamaicans in England came in the 70s, the Yardies, and there was a bit of racial conflict. Obviously, when there's a huge influx of a different kind of people, that's going to be a little tense for a while. But very quickly, the Jamaicans became soccer hooligans and playing ska music and sitting in the pub wearing a bomber jacket, almost skinhead patriots. And then you had the Indians come in the 70s and 80s. Very similar trajectory, same with Canada. But now it seems like when Muslims reach a certain tipping point, when they get up to close to 40%, we have animosity, we have Sharia law, we have, genital mutilation, we have acid attacks in Berlin. There seems to be a need to put the ISIS flag on the White House when they reach a certain number.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure the dynamics of that. All I knew is when I grew up in Bombay as a kid, all these people sort of lived together, because there were so many of all people. It was literally like an industrial furnace of America was a melting pot. But I think what happens is when you get people to a certain level, right, certain level of population, things sort of take on its own different type of dynamic like you're describing.
Well, it's funny you're a politician because you seem to be a closed borders kind of guy. But when we get these groups, like when we have a third Hispanic, a third white, and a third black, the whites are going to vote for the white guy. The Hispanics are going to vote for the Hispanic guy. It's all going to be racial-based elections. But most immigrants would be wrong to vote for you because you hate immigrants. I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I have a different attitude, right? I believe that nationalism is good.
Right.
You see, India never really overthrew its oppressor. Modi, the new prime minister, got elected. He's the first guy to actually promote a national identity, like Trump has done in a long time. I think progressive nationalism is a very, very good thing, and it's important. India had all these sellouts like Gandhi and Nehru, who basically transferred power from British colonialism. So you had white men with crowns leave, and you had brown men with white hats take over. But India never really had a national identity. Probably Modi's the first one to give that. And I think a national identity is extremely important. You can't even talk about internationalism, any of that, unless people actually define who they are. And I think what Trump has done, in my opinion, was a necessary disruption that was much needed, because most of the other sort of pseudo globalist stuff was frankly nonsense, right? It was really about not really identifying with anything nationalist, and sort of forgetting about the fact that America has a unique culture. It is very different, and supporting that. So I think what Trump's election is phenomenal for, I think, world history.
Yeah, and I think you and I are better at recognizing that than a lot of people, although you moved very young, but I'm an immigrant to America too, and I think I tend to appreciate it more than Americans because they've taken all this freedom for granted. But even I came from Britain and Canada, but even coming from Canada, you see the lack of free speech there, and the Canadian Human Rights Commission punishing anyone who says anything remotely Islamophobic or sexist or homophobic. I mean, they bankrupt people for being politically incorrect. And you come down here and you see the Supreme Court. The culture isn't great, by the way, with free speech, but the courts always err on the side of the First Amendment. And I don't think Americans recognize how fortunate they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's a birth lottery to be born in America. People forget that.
Yeah.
Many people forget that. I mean, I'm running, in Massachusetts on the Republican ticket, but really more of the Lincoln-style Republican. Lincoln, if you really look at it, said labor was more important than capital, which means you have to work. If you don't work, you don't eat. And I think people have forgotten the immense opportunity that America gives to people. I mean, it's frankly freaking incredible.
Yeah.
And I think the whole welfare state model, which the quote unquote establishment Democrats and Republicans have all colluded to create, is basically destroying America and the American dream, which was you have to work. And that entire process has been taken away. And that's why I think Trump was an important disruption to that.
Well, I think it's almost blasphemous. It's unnatural. You think about, we've evolved to derive pleasure from hard work. The ones who don't get those endorphins are extinct. So when you give someone money to just sit in their home all day, it's brutally unnatural, and you're making them depressed. And we see this with American Indians. They've lost their mojo. They're in homes that they don't own. They get a check when they turn 18 that they spend on a Chevy S10 Blazer that they wrap around a telephone pole. The money has made them miserable. And the only Indians that are happy are the ones that leave the res. I'm talking about Feather, not Dot. The ones who leave the res and start their own lives. By the way, speaking of feathers and dots, how are you going to avoid the real Indian versus fake Indian comparisons now that you're running against Elizabeth Warren?
Well, she's not only a fake Indian, but she's also a fake fighter. She's an opportunist, a hypocrite, and is a phony. I think part of it is she's sort of from an old era, right? If you look at her, think about her. She's from like the 15th century model of a politician, right? She lawyer, career politician, and an academic. And I think it's significantly different than me, who's had to actually work for a living since I've been, as far as I can remember when I came here, I've had a job since I was 12 years old. And I think the significant difference is in the 21st century, we're going to need innovators, entrepreneurs, and scientists, because that's what the 21st century is about. And I think this old model of a politician completely needs to be destroyed, particularly the academic industrial complex. I mean, within a 5-mile radius of where I am, you have essentially the belly of the beast here, right? These academic elites. So I have an interesting position, right? Because I've been in and out of MIT, got 4 degrees from there. But I also grew up in Newark, New Jersey, where I invented the first email system. So I understand the elitism of these people, and they try to control narratives, as you talk about on your show. And it all has to be contained within their structure. And when you go out of it, they get very upset, right? So they don't like the fact that I don't typically play the role of a good Indian, sitting in the lotus. And they've designed these narratives. They're the most racist and segregationist people on the planet. And yet they like to, talk about guys like you and me and others as though we're racist and segregationists, when in fact, they're the most clever racist and segregationists around.
It's just the quickest way to discredit someone is just go to
Yeah,
racist, sexist, you know.
But they're especially vitriolic when it comes to gays, invisible minorities, and women.
Right, 'cause
Because
they
they're
feel
like,
like
you're
they're
an Uncle
traitors.
Tom. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be on our side. We need your melanin
Right.
to help our cause.
Giving the other side points.
You know what's inspiring about your mission is I think it's relatively easy. I think that Trump showed us that America is sick of the academics and the old establishment, and the free market, I think, is dying to come out. It's like the egg is cracking, and I can't remember exactly where this was. Maybe it was Ohio, but a governor there said, why don't we do this with welfare? Why don't we have people volunteer? They have to do, say, 20 hours, 15 hours of volunteer work a month to justify their checks. And maybe the ones that could be out there working will stop taking welfare checks. Maybe we'll take down welfare about 10%, 5%. It ended up taking down welfare 80%.
Wow.
Because these people thought, if I'm going to be out there working, I might as well get paid.
Right.
And boom, it was over. I think there's this myth that the old Italian nonna, she needs the food stamps to make a spaghetti sauce for her 18 kids, is long gone. That's a myth. They're mostly lazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire, as an immigrant, my parents worked their butts off. My mom was a housewife, then she used to go work another 12-hour job as an analyst, and same with my dad as an engineer. So I, saw these two people bust their butts, so the thought of not working seems so guilty to me.
Yeah.
So I find it pretty amazing that we've created a culture where you can live reasonably well without having to work. And that's absolutely, I think, sinful. And people like Elizabeth Warren, they're basically, I mean, think about her. She makes, I think, $400,000 for teaching one course at Harvard. I taught a course at MIT, didn't take a penny. And she flipped homes. But separate even from that, the entire academic model is about basically the old priesthood. See, I grew up as what you would call a lower caste, Gavin, in India. You won't find a lot of Indians like me. The fact that my parents even made it here is sort of 1 in a trillion. So my parents escaped the caste system of India to come here. And what you find here is there's a neo-caste system. People like Elizabeth Warren, all these intellectuals are the old priesthood. And they are absolutely the most vicious people when you really unravel who they're about. It's all about them controlling narratives and pandering to anything that comes their way. They don't really want to solve any problem. It's about creating divisiveness using race and sex wherever they go. And we live in a planet right now where, or in a country where we need to actually solve problems. And that takes innovation. It's actually using your brain. It's actually looking at things rationally and solving problems. And these people have never, ever had to do that in their lives. They've never had to pay a bill. They never had to pay employees. They've never had to collect. They've never had to create something, deliver a product, none of that. And so it's really, really unfortunate. But I feel pretty excited because it's really cool to sort of deliver a big defeat to these people right in their own backyard, which is, I think, what's necessary. And I think beating Warren is going to send a signal not only to all the other sort of bullshit people, and have bullshitted people for centuries, but also globally. And so I'm very excited about this. And if you actually go to my website, you'll see that I've been a fighter since I was a kid, Gavin. You'll see me fighting at MIT since I was 17, burning the South African flag. I was the first one to ask for U.S. out of Iraq. When I went into India and I was appointed by the Prime Minister's office to run the large innovation center, I wrote a thesis on corruption, was chased out of India. I fought against Gawker Media, when they said I didn't invent email and called me all sorts of names. So I've been a fighter. But these people are not fighters. If you look at Elizabeth Warren, since 1995, she's been in Harvard. It'd be really interesting to find out, did she ever say anything negative about Harvard? So they'll sit in their nice, beautiful home institutions and talk about stuff elsewhere, but they will never say anything about all the shit that goes on in their own institutions, because that's their little ivory tower home institution. So it's absolutely hypocrisy. It's just disgusting people.
Her only hope is spending more money than you on propaganda, but you're rich, right?
Well, I'm rich. I've made my own money, but we're going to run our campaign in the good old-fashioned American way. Hard work. We're not going to hire any of these blood-sucking consultants, as Trump said. We have volunteers. You'll see a couple of students have refurbished a bus for me, which we're going to go direct to people. We're going to do it the way it's supposed to be done. We're going to educate people, inspire people, and talk about innovation. and we're going to use social media. But I would like to. We have a lot of people want to give us money because they hate Warren so badly. I don't trust the Republican establishment in this state, nor the obviously not the Democratic establishment. I mean, Charlie Baker, for example, didn't even support Trump. 70% of the so-called Republicans in this state didn't support Trump. So they have loyalty. So, I'm not going to trust any of them for any support. We're going to go directly to the people.
So what can I do? When is this vote? How do I get my people out?
There's many ways people can help. We want to raise small money right on the website. The website donation button is going to go up this week. It's called Shiva with the number 4 Senate.com. Any way you can, I want to go direct among people. So if people want to help us organize events in Massachusetts, that'd be awesome. And then the primary election is September. I'm the only one who is running as a Republican right now. Kurt Schilling just supported me, and the other Republican guy just dropped out. So it looks like as of now, it's me and Warren. And obviously we want support and basically to galvanize all of this, I think, righteous hatred against Warren, which really symbolizes a hatred against the elites and hypocrites who've basically, taken over the American dream.
Okay, so September will be when the election goes down.
September is the Republican, and November 2018 is the official election for Senate.
Okay, we're going to get you elected. This is going to happen.
Yep.
We're going to keep tuning back in closer to each date, and we're going to have unprecedented numbers at the polls.
Definitely. Thanks, Gavin. I mean, I think we'll keep you updated on our different positions, and every step of the way that she goes, we want to expose her hypocrisy. And
Yes.
I think that's what's really needed, and to educate people how the so-called social democrats work. Even Lenin, the great Lenin, as some people call him. Yeah, that Lenin, the other Lenin. But he also said social democracy was the other face of fascism. He wrote a great treatise on it. And many of these people don't even read their own socialism. You're supposed to actually work before you eat, or to eat. You're not supposed to get, nothing's supposed to be for free.
Yeah, and
So
I'll tell you what, there's nothing more delicious than a beer after you built a fence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're looking at the fence you just built, and you're sitting on your porch, and there's more flavor in it for some reason.
Yeah.
They took a bunch of manic depressives. I don't know if you read this study, but I'm a scientist also, but they took a bunch of manic depressives. 90 days, they put them to hard work. All of their symptoms disappeared.
The only time I
Wow.
ever really get depressed is if I don't have a job.
You haven't had a job for a year and a half.
I'm a little sad.
All right, thank you very much, future
Thanks, Gavin.
Senator, and good luck finding the fake Indian.
Okay, great show. Be well.
Thanks, Shiva.